the village of Nambala, when elders speak, even the wind listens. Mud houses stood in a wide circle, their walls cracked by time and silence. At the center was the old Aroko tree, where judgments were made and destinies were broken. That morning, the drums did not beat. No songs were sung, only whispers moved like snakes through the crowd. She stood there alone. Her name was Zawadi. Barefoot, hid, lowered, dust clinging to her torn dress like shame that refused to leave. No mother stood beside her, no father spoke for her. No hand reached out. The village had already decided. "Take her away," one elder said, his voice heavy like stone. Zawadi did not cry out. In Nambala, crying before elders was seen as weakness. Tears were for the night, when no one could witness your breaking. Women avoided her eyes. Men looked past her. Children watched quietly, learning how the world treats the unwanted. She had grown up among them. Yet today, she was a stranger. They called her a burden. They whispered bad luck. Some said she carried misfortune from birth. But none of them remembered the night she was born. None of them remembered the storm that had stopped suddenly, or the strange cry of an owl at dawn. Only one person remembered. An old woman, bent like dry wood, sat at the edge of the gathering. Her eyes followed Zawadi with a fear that did not belong to age. She tightened her grip on her walking stick, as if holding back a truth too heavy to speak. Zawadi's stepmother stepped forward. "She brings nothing but shame," the woman said loudly. "She eats what she does not earn. She sleeps under my roof, without gratitude." The elders nodded. In this village, a woman without parents had no voice. Tradition did not protect the forgotten. Zawadi felt her chest tighten. Not from anger, not from fear, from knowing this moment had been waiting for her all along. She remembered her mother's voice from long ago, soft like evening fire. "Child, when people throw you away, listen carefully. Fate is usually close." The elder raised his staff. "You no longer belong here," he declared. "From today, your path is no longer our concern." The words struck harder than any slap. Belonging was everything in them. To be cast out was worse than death. It meant walking without ancestors, without protection, without name. Zawadi bowed. Not because she agreed, but because dignity was the only thing left to her. She turned slowly, each step heavy. The dust rose behind her, erasing her footprints, as if the village wished she had never existed. No farewell, no blessing, only silence. As she reached the edge of the village, she felt it, a strange stillness. The wind stopped. The birds went quiet. Even the Iroko leaves ceased their whispering. Zawadi said. Something unseen passed through the air, like a breath held too long. Behind her, the old woman suddenly cried out. "Destiny does not beg," she shouted, her voice shaking. "It returns," but no one listened. Zawadi stepped onto the narrow road leading away from everything she had known. Ahead lay uncertainty, hunger, and danger. Behind her stood a village that believed it had erased a problem. They did not know what they had just thrown away. They did not know that fate does not argue with elders. It waits, and it always comes back, with power. Was this truly the end of Zawadi's story, or only the moment fate decided to begin? Before the village learned to fear Zawadi, it had once learned to love her. She was born during the season when the earth cracked open for rain. Thunder had rolled across the sky that night, loud enough to wake even the ancestors. Women whispered that such storms followed children who carried heavy destinies. Her mother, Nia, was gentle and proud. She sang old songs while pounding grain, songs passed from grandmother to daughter, songs meant to calm restless spirits. Nia believed children heard more than adults understood. Zawadi was still small when her father died. In Nambala, death was not announced with words. It arrived with drums. Slow, heavy beats that traveled through the soil and into the bones of the living. The elder said his spirit had gone to sit with the ancestors beneath the sacred baobab. After that, life changed its voice. Her mother grew thinner, quieter. Nights became longer. When sickness took Nia, the village gathered again, not with celebration, but with duty. Women washed the body. Elders spoke prayers. Fire burned until dawn. Zawadi watched silently. She was too young to understand loss, but old enough to feel its weight. From that day, she belonged to no one. Her father's brother took her in, as tradition demanded. With him came his new wife, a woman who believed love was something that had to be earned through obedience. At first, the cruelty was hidden. Sharp words, wrapped in laughter. Small tasks that grew heavier each day. Zawadi learned quickly that silence was safer than questions. In Nambala, a child without parents lived by the mercy of others. She fetched water from the stream before sunrise. She swept compounds until her hands burned. When food was shared, she ate last. When mistakes were made, she was blamed first. The stepmother often reminded her, "You are here because we allowed Zawadi know that." At night, she slept on a mat near the door, listening to the village breathe. She learned the sounds of goats settling, of distant drums, of women whispering secrets to the dark. Sometimes, she dreamed. In her dreams, she stood beneath a great tree, taller than any in Nambala. Elders bowed to her, though she did not know why. She always woke, confused, her heart racing, her hands empty. As the years passed, whispers followed her steps. Strange child. Too quiet. Not normal. Children mocked her worn clothes. Women avoided her. Men pretended not to see her. Only the elders watched carefully. During festivals, when libations were poured for ancestors, Zawadi felt a strange pull in her chest. When the village priest chanted ancient words, her skin tingled as if remembering something forgotten. Once, during a naming ceremony, an old elder stared at her for too long. His hands trembled. He said nothing but that night he could not sleep. In Nambala, such things were not ignored. Yet no one spoke for her. Tradition protected bloodlines, not orphans. As Zawadi grew older, her stepmother grew harsher. She saw the girl not as a child, but as a problem that refused to disappear. "There is no future for her here," the woman told the elders one evening. "She eats, she sleeps, but she brings nothing." The elders listened. In the distance, the drums began to beat again, not for celebration, but for decision. Zawadi did not know it yet, that the path of her life was already shifting. Quietly, unannounced, village that had raised her in silence was preparing to push her into the unknown, and fate, patient as the earth, was watching. Would Zawadi's past break her, or was it shaping her for something the village feared to name? In Nambala, suffering did not always shout. Sometimes, it sat quietly beside you, sharing your mat, eating from your bowl, and waiting for you to break. For Zawadi, the days grew heavier. Her stepmother no longer hid her cruelty behind words. She used work instead. Work that bent the back and hardened the hands. Before the first rooster cried, Zawadi was already awake, lifting water pots heavier than her body, walking long paths without complaint. When she stumbled, she was called lazy. When she rested, she was called useless. The village watched. So me felt pity. But pity was not action. In Nambala, no one challenged a woman within her own compound. Tradition drew clear lines. Zawadi had no power to cross. At the market, her stepmother spoke loudly about her. "She eats like a goat," the woman said, but her hands produced nothing. Laughter followed. Zawadi kept her eyes on the ground. She had learned that pride invited punishment. Silence, at least, reduced the blows. One afternoon, during the dry season, she was accused of stealing grain. The elders were called. Zawadi stood before them beneath the Iroko tree, the same place where truth was supposed to live. Her heart pounded, but her face remained still. "I did not take it," she said softly. Her stepmother laughed. "Listen to how easily she lies." No proof was asked for. No questions were raised. The elders believed the one who owned the roof, not the one who slept near the door. Zawadi was punished. She knelt under the sun until her legs shook. Dust covered her knees. Sweat blurred her vision. Children passed, pointing and whispering. She did not cry. In Nambala, tears during punishment were seen as disrespect. That night, she washed her knees in the stream. The water burned, but she welcomed the pain. Pain was easier than confusion. As she stared at her reflection, she whispered, "If this is my place, then let me endure it with honor." But endurance has limits. The breaking moment came without warning. One evening, as the moon rose pale and thin, the stepmother announced her decision. "She will no longer stay here," the woman declared. "I will not feed a useless body." The words struck deeper than any insult before. The elders were informed. A small gathering was called. No drums. No ceremony. Just judgment. Zawadi stood again beneath the Iroko tree. Older now. Thinner. Quieter. "You are no longer a child," an elder sighed. "The village has no duty toward you." Tradition spoke through his voice. She bowed her head. Inside her chest, something shifted. Not anger, not hatred. Understanding. That night, she packed nothing. She owned nothing worth carrying. Before leaving, she walked to the old baobab tree at the edge of the village. She placed her palm against its bark, as her mother once taught her. "Guide my steps," she whispered. "If I have a path, show it." The wind moved through the leaves, slow and steady. Zawadi straightened her back. For the first time, she did not walk because she was told to. She walked because she chose to. The road ahead was unknown. Hunger waited. Danger waited. The world beyond Nambala did not care about forgotten girls. But something inside her refused to die. As she stepped into the darkness beyond the village fires, Zawadi did not look back, because deep within her silence, a quiet voice had finally spoken. "This is not the end. This is the turning." But where would the road take her, and what would it demand in return? The road did not ask Zawadi who she was. It only demanded that she'll keep walking. For 2 days, she followed the narrow red path that cut through tall grass and sleeping villages. She drank from streams when she could and slept beneath open skies. Hunger sat beside her like an unwanted companion, but she did not complain. In Nambala, she had learned that survival belonged to those who endured quietly. On the third morning, she saw it, the outer lands of the royal estate. High walls of clay and stone rose from the earth, strong and watchful. Tall gates carved with ancestral symbols stood firm, guarded by men whose spears caught the sun. Beyond them lay a world whispered about in village jest, the palace of Kitala. Zawadi stopped in her dreams. She had seen walls like these. She shook the thought away. Dreams did not feed the hungry. At the gate, she lowered her eyes and spoke carefully. "I seek work." The guards laughed softly. "This is not a place for strays," one said, "but hunger sharpens humility." Zawadi stood still, waiting. Silence, she had learned, could be more powerful than begging. An older guard studied her closely. His gaze lingered on her face, then on her hands, scarred, used to labor. "Let her try the servant quarters," he said finally. "If she fails, she leaves." And just like that, she was allowed to enter. Inside, the world changed its voice. The palace grounds were wide and orderly. Drums rested in shaded corners. Servants moved with purpose, their steps measured. No one shouted, no one rusade. Everything followed rules older than memory. Zawadi was taken to the lowest quarters, where water carriers and floor sweepers slept. She was given no name, only a task. Work. Speak when spoken to, watch everything. She obeyed. In Tea Palace hierarchy was law. Servants bowed low. Overseers spoke sharply. Mistakes were remembered. Zawadi learned quickly. She swept corridors that smelled of incense and power. She carried water past rooms where councils met. She heard voices through carved doors, voices of elders, nobles, and sometimes the king himself. No one noticed her, and yet someone watched. An elderly palace woman, bent and slow, often paused when Zawadi passed. Her eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but recognition. Once, as Zawadi poured water nearby, the woman murmured an old proverb under her breath. "The river does not forget its source." Zawadi felt a chill. At night, in the 7 quarters, she dreamed again. This time, The tree was closer. The elders stood in silence. A crown lay at the roots, half buried in soil. She woke before dawn, her heart pounding. Days passed. Weeks followed. Zawadi remained quiet, respectful, invisible. But strange things happened. Once, during a royal procession, the palace drums skipped a beat as she passed. Another time, the king's horse refused to move until she stepped aside. Whispers began. "Who is that girl? She walks like royalty." "No, she is only a servant." Zawadi heard none of it. She focused on her work, unaware that fate had already carried her across a line no orphan was meant to cross. High above, in the inner chambers of the palace, an ancient scroll was unrolled. An elder's finger traced faded symbols. His face darkened. "The signs are returning," he whispered. Outside, beneath the wide palace sky, Zawadi lifted her face to the sun for a brief moment. She did not know it yet, but the gates she entered as a servant were the same gates she would one day command. What secret had followed her into the palace? And who would dare speak it first? In the palace of Kitala, secrets did not scream. They braided. They moved through corridors like unseen smoke, settling in places where the past had been buried but never forgotten. Zawadi felt it before she understood it. Since entering the palace, her dreams had changed. They were no longer distant or confusing. They came with weight, with clarity, with voices that did not belong to the living. Each night, she stood beneath the same ancient tree. Its roots were deeper now, twisting into darkness. From its branches hung symbols she did not recognize, yet somehow remembered. Drums beat slowly in the distance, calling her name not loudly, but with certainty. She always woke before the dream could finish. Sweat on her skin, a tightness in her chest, a feeling that something had been left unsaid. During the day, the palace elders grew restless. Old men who had not walked unaided in years now gathered more often. Sacred gourds were opened. Dusty scrolls were brought into the light. The palace priest burned herbs meant to awaken ancestral memory. "The signs are too many," one elder murmured. "This has happened before." Another shook his head. "We swore never to speak of it again." Yet the ancestors do not keep secrets forever. One afternoon, Zawadi was sent to clean the hall of lineage, a place servants rarely entered. The walls were carved with the names of kings, queens, and bloodlines stretching back beyond counting. As she swept, her gaze stopped on a symbol etched low into the wall half erased by time. Her breath caught. She did not know why, but her fingers trembled as she traced it lightly. A sharp pain shot through her head. Images flashed. A woman running through tall grass, a baby wrapped in royal cloth, a voice whispering, "Hide her." Zawadi staggered back. At the doorway, the old palace woman watched her closely. "You felt it," the woman said softly. Zawadi lowered her eyes. "Felt what?" The woman did not answer. Instead, she pressed a small object into Zawadi's palm, a beaded bracelet, old and worn. "My mother wore this," the woman said, "and her mother before her." Zawadi stared at it. "I was told to give it to you when the time felt right." Before Zawadi could speak, the woman turned and walked away. That night, the dreams returned stronger. This time, the tree split open. Inside its hollow lay a bundle of cloth, the same cloth that once wrapped her as a baby. Voices rose around her, arguing, afraid. If she stays, blood will be spilled. If she leaves, destiny will find her. Zawadi woke with tears streaming down her face. Across the palace, in the inner council chamber, the elders sat in silence. One of them placed the beaded bracelet on the floor. "It belongs to the lost bloodline," he said. "The child we thought gone." Another elder's voice shook. "If this is true, the throne itself is threatened." Silence fell. Tradition was clear. Blood could not be denied forever. But truth had a cost. Outside, Zawadi knelt in the servant quarters, holding the bracelet tightly. She did not understand why her heart ached the way it did. She only knew that something ancient had awakened within her. She whispered a question to the night. "Why now?" The wind moved gently through the palace grounds, carrying a reply only fate could hear. Because the time of hiding had ended, and the time of return was near. But when the truth finally surfaced, would it save her, or destroy everything she had just begun to belong to? In Kitala, when elders gather without drums, it means the ancestors are already speaking. That night, the palace fires burned low. Shadows stretched along the walls like listening spirits. One by one, the elders entered the inner council chamber, each carrying the weight of memories they had sworn to bury. The beaded bracelet lay at the center. No one touched it. The ancestors are restless, the palace priest finally said. The dreams are spreading. Even the guards feel it. An elder with a scarred face leaned forward. Then speak clearly. Are we saying the child lives? Teva, I see you. At last, the oldest among them, his voice thin but firm, nodded slowly. She lives, he said, and she walks among us. Fear rippled through the room. That is impossible, another elder snapped. We watched her leave. We sealed the secret. You sealed your mouths, the old one replied, not fate. They all knew the truth they were circling. Years ago, when the kingdom trembled under prophecy, a child had been hidden to prevent bloodshed. The elders had chosen silence over chaos. They believed time would erase destiny. They were wrong. The signs align, the priest said. The mark, te, dreams, re. The symbols responding to her presence. A younger elder whispered, if the people learn this, the throne will shake. Outside the council chamber, Zawadi scrubbed the stone floor, unaware that her name now carried weight in rooms she had never entered. She felt watched, though no one stood nearby. The palace seemed to breathe differently around her. That morning, the overseer spoke to her more gently than before. Be careful today, he said, avoiding her eyes. The elders are watching what? Zawadi wondered. Later, as she carried water past the royal courtyard, the queen emerged unexpectedly. Her gaze fell on Zawadi and lingered. For a brief moment, the world stood still. The queen's breath caught. Something familiar stirred behind her eyes, recognition mixed with dread. Who is she? The queen asked quietly. A servant bowed. No one, my queen, just a worker. The queen said nothing more, but her hands trembled. That night, the elders summoned the old palace woman, the one who had given Zawadi the bracelet. You were told to wait, an elder said sharply. I was told to listen, the woman replied, and the ancestors spoke. You risk everything. No, she said calmly. I protect it. The decision could no longer be delayed. A final gathering was ordered, not public, but sacred. A test rooted in ancient custom, one that only true blood could answer. Still, doubt clawed at them. What if we are wrong? Someone asked. The oldest elder stood, leaning heavily on his staff. Then the ancestors will be silent, he said. But if we are right, they will speak through her. Across the palace grounds, Zawadi sat alone beneath the night sky, turning the bracelet in her hands. She felt a storm building inside her, fear, longing, confusion. All her life, she had been told she was nothing. Yet now, the world around her shifted with every step she took. She pressed her palm to the earth and whispered, if you have chosen me, give me strength. In the distance, the royal drums sounded once deep and deliberate. The call of truth had begun. And soon, it would demand an answer from everyone. When the elders finally call her forward, will Zawadi step into her destiny? Or will the weight of truth crush her first? In Kitala, respect was not given. It was felt. Zawadi noticed the change before anyone spoke of it. Doors that once closed quickly now remained open a little longer. Voices that used to command her now softened. Even footsteps slowed when she passed. She did not ask why. She had learned that sudden kindness often arrived before great change. The elders summoned her to the outer courtyard, a place reserved for matters of tradition. Servants were rarely called there, and when they were, it was never good news. Zawadi washed her hands and face carefully. She straightened her simple garment. She did not dress to impress, only to honor herself. As she stepped into the courtyard, conversation died. Elders sat in a half circle. The palace priest stood beside them. The queen watched from behind a carved screen, unseen but present. Zawadi bowed low. "Child," the oldest elder said, studying her, "do you know where you stand?" She replied honestly, "Before my elders." A murmur passed through the circle. They began with questions, not accusations, but observations. About her dreams, hair, bust, the way symbols seemed to respond to her presence. Zawadi answered softly, "Truthfully, I have always felt called," she admitted, "but I did not know by what." The palace priest nodded slowly. They asked her to perform small tasks, rooted in ancient custom topu libation, to recite old proverbs taught only to children of lineage. Zawadi hesitated, then spoke. The words flowed from her lips, as if remembered rather than learned. Gasps followed. The elders exchanged looks heavy with meaning. Still, Zawadi remained calm. No pride rose in her chest. No anger burned in her eyes. She stood as she always had, grounded, respectful, humble. That humility shook them more than any prophecy. After the gathering, she was not sent back to the servant quarters. Instead, she was given a small room near the inner courtyard. Nothing luxurious, nothing public, just closer. Whispers spread through the palace. She is different. She carries herself like one born to lead. Even the elders listen when she speaks. Those who once ignored her now greeted her with lowered eyes. Overseers corrected themselves when addressing her. The old palace woman smiled quietly from a distance, yet Zawadi remained unchanged. She still helped other servants, still listened more than she spoke, still thanked those who showed her kindness. One night, as she stood alone beneath the stars, the queen approached her openly for the first time. "You are not afraid," the queen said. Zawadi bowed. "Fear has walked with me since childhood, my queen. I learned not to let it lead." The queen studied her, face so familiar it hurt. "Power reveals who we truly are," she said. "And you reveal patience." Zawadi did not understand the full meaning, but her heart felt steady. Inside the palace walls, a truth was rising slowly, deliberately, not with force, but with recognition. And outside, far away in Nambala, the village that once cast her out continued its days in ignorance, unaware that the child they discarded was no longer walking alone. Destiny was no longer hiding. It was standing tall, and soon it would speak its name. But when the final truth is spoken before all, will the world accept Zawadi's rise, or will it resist what fate has already chosen? Enkitala, the drums only beat like this for one reason: truth. From the first light of dawn, the palace prepared. The sacred courtyard was swept clean with palm leaves. White chalk symbols were drawn on the earth, marking a circle older than the kingdom itself. Elders arrived wrapped in ancestral cloth, their faces solemn, their steps slow but certain. Word spread quickly. This was no ordinary gathering. Zawadi stood at the edge of the courtyard, her heart steady but heavy. She had been washed with sacred water, her wrists adorned with the ancient bracelet. Still, she wore no royal cloth. Not yet. The people gathered: nobles, servants, guards, villagers from nearby lands. Even messengers from distant kingdoms stood quietly, sensing history unfold. The queen stepped forward. Silence fell. "Today," she said, "we listen not to power, but to truth." The palace priest raised his staff and began the ancestral chant. The air thickened. Even the birds grew quiet. Zawadi was called into the circle. She felt the ground beneath her feet solid, unyielding. She did not tremble. The oldest elder spoke. "Years ago," he began, "fear ruled this kingdom. A prophecy spoke of a child whose return would change the balance of power. We chose silence. We chose hiding." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He continued, his voice breaking. "We believed we were protecting the kingdom, but destiny does not disappear when ignored." He turned towards Zawadi. The child lived. Gasps filled the courtyard. The palace priest lifted an ancient cloth, revealing markings known only to the royal bloodline. Then the bracelet was raised high. its beads catching the sun. The signs respond only to one truth, the priest declared. She is of the lost lineage. All eyes turned to Zawadi. Shock spread like fire. Some fell to their knees. Others stepped back in disbelief. A few wept openly. The queen removed her head covering and walked forward slowly. Tears streamed down her face as she reached Zawadi. "My child," she whispered, her voice breaking with years of buried pain. Zawadi's breath caught. Memories rushed streams. Voices. The tree. The cloth. The ache she never understood. The world tilted, yet she did not collapse. She held the queen's gaze and bowed. "I did not come seeking a throne," Zawadi said softly. "I only sought a place to belong." Her words silenced the courtyard. The elder who once ordered her exile in Nambala stepped forward, trembling. Shame weighed heavily on him. "We judged what we did not understand," he said. "We threw away what we feared." Zawadi looked at him not with anger, not with pride, with respect. She replied, "You did what you believed was right, but fate is older than fear." There was no punishment, no public humiliation, no revenge. Only truth. The palace priest struck the earth once with his staff. "Let it be known," I proclaim, "that destiny has returned." The drums erupted not in chaos, but in celebration. A rhythm of renewal, of healing. Zawadi stood in the center of it all, tears finally falling, not from pain but from release. She had been thrown away, but fate had never let her go. And now, before all who once doubted, the ancestors had spoken her name. Yet after truth is revealed, what does one do with the power it brings? In Katela, peace did not arrive with noise. It arrived slowly, like rain after a long drought. The days following the revelation were quiet. No one rushed Zawadi. No crown was placed on her head in haste. The elders understood that destiny, when forced, loses its wisdom. Instead, tradition was followed. She was given time. Time to breathe. Time to remember. Time to choose who she would become. The palace changed its rhythm around her. Servants spoke her name with care. Elders sought her presence, not out of fear, but respect. Yet Zawadi remained grounded. Each morning, she greeted the sunrise as she always had, barefoot on the earth, whispering thanks to the ancestors. The queen walked beside her often. They spoke not of power, but of loss, of years stolen by fear, of a child hidden to protect a kingdom, only to be broken by silence. "I searched for you in my prayers," the queen confessed one evening, "but fate hid you better than my tears could find." Zawadi listened, her heart full but steady. "I was never lost," she replied gently. "I was being prepared." Word reached Nambala. The village that had cast her out gathered beneath the same Iroko tree where her fate had once been sealed. The elders sat heavily now, their authority humbled by truth. When Zawadi returned, not in chains, not in anger, but in dignity, the village fell silent. She wore no royal crown, only simple cloth. "I did not come to judge," she said calmly. "I came to close a circle." Her stepmother stood trembling, shame written deep across her face. She expected punishment, exile, public disgrace. Zawadi looked at her for a long moment. Then she spoke. "The past cannot be changed," she said, "but the future listens to how we speak today." There was no revenge, no humiliation, only forgiveness that cut deeper than punishment. The elders bowed their heads. From that day on, things changed. Children were taught that silence is not weakness. Women were reminded that cruelty poisons lineage, and elders learned that tradition must walk with compassion. Zawadi did not rule with fear. She listened. She remembered hunger when food was shared. She remembered cold when shelter was built. She remembered loneliness when justice was decided. Under her guidance, the kingdom grew not louder, but wiser. Years later, elders would tell her story by firelight, not as a tale of power, but of patience. They would say she was thrown away, but fate carried her gently. She returned not to destroy, but to heal. And when the children asked what lesson the story carried, the elders would answer, "Never judge what you do not understand. Never discard what you fear. Destiny walks quietly, but it always remembers where it belongs." Zawadi often returned to the old baobab tree at the edge of Number. She would place her palm on its bark, just as she had done the night she left. This time, she smiled, because the earth was whole again, and so was she.